and welcome to the India Roadshow. I'm Shereen Bhan and we're in conversation with the CEO of Adobe, Shantanu Narayen. Shantanu, appreciate you joining us back on CNBC TV 18 and this time in your hometown in San Francisco as opposed to you being in India.
Well, Shereen, it's a pleasure to be here and welcome to foggy San Francisco, right?
Well, yes, the weather has not held up, but you know, in a sense, the finance minister here trying to pitch the India story to foreign investors like Adobe, the Googles and the Amazons of the world. But in a sense, he's preaching to the converted because you're already invested in India and you have been significantly upping your investment in India over the last few years. But what is it that you think people are going to be watching out for from him?
Well, I think the two aspects, hopefully, of what we'd like to hear from him. The first is what he's going to do to make India a better place for us to invest. And from a talent point of view, I don't think anybody has had any issues, but also from a business climate and in software particularly, how the Digital India initiative could be an initiative where companies like Adobe can leverage our technology to make a business out of it in addition to, developing great software. And so, it'd be interesting to hear his perspectives on both.
But in specific, when you talk about Digital India, for instance, what is it that you would like more clarity on? Because, I mean, everyone wants a piece of either Digital India or Smart City initiative, but no one really is quite sure of the nuts and bolts and the manner in which the government is planning to roll all of this out.
Well, I'm privileged in that I serve on President Obama's Management Advisory Board, and I think what has been clear in the U.S. is that you can use technology to good use in order to really change citizen-facing services. Right. And so I think in India, when you think of how mobile phones can be used to, completely disrupt government and transform government, I'd be interested in understanding how he would like U.S. companies that are based in technology to, look at that as an opportunity and frankly contribute, because I think all of us look at how technology has transformed lives. And India has the opportunity to actually leapfrog generations of technology.
Okay, so that's as far as future opportunities are concerned, but you talked about the business climate and improving the business climate, specifically on tax-related issues, royalty-related issues. IT companies have had trouble in India. IPR continues to be a problem and a challenge that people and investors are concerned about. On both of these issues, do you believe that the needle has moved forward?
Well, with intellectual property concerns, which we have and other companies like movies have, I don't think the fundamental business environment has changed. But what Adobe has done specifically in that regard is rather than distribute software through desktop software that was easily piratable, we are now delivering it through the cloud. And so the beauty of it is the fact that customers, in case they want the access to the best technology, have to subscribe to the cloud. So we're actually using technology rather than policy to solve the problem.
It's not holding back your investment.
It still is holding back our investment. And when you look at India from the point of view of how many PCs are sold and the relative revenue for most US-based technology companies, I think we would still say it's on the small side. It is growing, and it's growing quite rapidly. And I think the secret to that, honestly, is the fact that the indigenous software industry in India is now evolving. And anytime that happens, in order to encourage that investment in the venture community in India, I think they're starting to address it. So I think it's going to be slow, but Adobe is not standing still. We're going to use the cloud to help address that issue.
Okay, so you've already sort of announced your incremental plans as far as India is concerned, both in terms of investments as well as your headcount expansion that you're looking at. But given the strength of the initiatives that the government has announced so far, do you believe that maybe there could be more?
Well, I think our growth in India is going to be directly correlated to our growth all around the world. And Adobe right now is doing extremely well. To your point, we built 2 brand new facilities. We moved into the new one in Bangalore. We'll do the same in Noida. And so I think, as we grow, it'll be an opportunity for us, if the Indian business grows, to actually further accelerate our business. Otherwise, our global plans for this year are pretty much set, and as we enter the new fiscal year, we'll be thinking about additional investment in India.
The last conversation that you and I had, you said that you were not looking specifically at acquisitions in India because they didn't really fit the kind of needs that you were looking for at this point in time, or the holes that you wanted to plug. Has that changed? Anything looking exciting in India today?
Well, what's interesting is we actually made a couple of small acquisitions over the last few months, and they all have R&D facilities in India. And so I think,
so it's a quasi-India play, is it?
That's exactly right. Rather than these big companies that are completely India-based. They definitely have engineering and R&D. But I look at what's happening with valuations, and I know we touched on that.
Yeah.
The valuations are insane, and I think as long as somebody in India has a neighbor, a friend that has seen a successful exit, I think it's going to encourage even more innovation in India, which I think is awesome.
You know, since you talked about innovation, this issue of immigration is back up now with several Indian IT service providers being probed for a violation of visa norms and so on and so forth. Do you see this getting worse as we get into the thick of the US presidential elections? And also I want you to comment on a comment that Vishal Sikka has made at the Infosys AGM, saying that, you know, let's focus on innovation and not immigration. Like you decided to use the cloud to get past the IPR policy, is this going to have to sort of, you know, be dependent on sort of sidestepping through innovative ways, or is that even possible?
Well, political rhetoric aside, Adobe is really not impacted by the immigration.
Yeah, you're not.
You know,
Yeah.
20 years ago, everybody was wondering what they had to do in the Adobe India office to be considered for immigration to the United States.
Right.
That hasn't existed in the last 15 years, which I think is a tribute to actually how India has evolved. And so, you know, I really don't pay much attention to
No, I ask
political
you this
rhetoric.
because you sit on the Obama administration looking at policy matters, but do you believe that this is going to be something that, I mean, even the finance minister said it's not an issue that's likely to be resolved anytime soon, but do you see this as a cause for concern, especially as far as the Indian IT service providers go?
Well, I see the biggest root cause is job creation. And as long as you have job creation, what's true in the United States, which I think is equally true in India right now, is it's incredibly hard to find qualified talent in certain fields. And I think that's where, whether you're the US government or the Indian government, I think focusing on education and focusing on the right skill set, that's the only recipe, honestly, for improving you know, the lot of people's lives.
You know, you said talent is not an issue in India, but when you talk to a lot of investors, they say that, you know, while you have a lot of young talent, it's not necessarily employable, and they need to spend large sums of money in actually retraining or reskilling this talent. But that hasn't been your experience in India. And from a skilling point of view, because, you know, that's the other mission or mandate of this government, what is it that you would like to see?
Well, I think more emphasis on engineering education. I mean, the IITs are definitely considered among the premier institutions, but if you look at the number of people who get into IIT relative to the available talent pool, it's minuscule. And so I think whatever you can do to improve that. In terms of skill set itself for Adobe, we think that on-the-job training is the best form of training. And so, you know, unlike some of the other IT companies that have a very formal education process, we throw them into the deep end, you know. It's like...
sink or swim.
Well, hopefully they all swim, but, you know, there's nothing like actually participating in product development for them to feel empowered and for them to feel a part of the mission rather than sending them off to another school, especially if they've been through 4 years of school.
Yeah. You know, the finance ministers here are also trying to reach out to the Indian diaspora to try and get the Indian diaspora to be more consistent in giving back by way of investing in India, especially perhaps in the Indian entrepreneurial space. How excited is the diaspora right now about investing in India, in your assessment? And what would it take, for instance, for you, in your personal capacity, to maybe fund a startup in India? Would you consider that?
Well, two separate questions. The first question with respect to the Indian diaspora, I think all of us feel incredibly fortunate to have India as our heritage, and ways in which we can give back. If there are vehicles that are created that allow us to contribute, whether it's teaching in educational institutions or investing in startups, I think you'll find a beeline of people who are willing to do that if the process is made a little bit more seamless. With respect to investing itself, you know, as long as I'm at Adobe and running the company, I just don't want any conflict of interest. But if I was a venture capitalist, I would be setting up shop in India right now.
Valuations are not looking crazy there, you think?
You know, I think the VC business model is so different, right? I mean, the VC business model is you want a generation of entrepreneurs, and you want the ability for successful exits, and they exist right now. And so that would not deter me at all. In fact, you know, both times of extreme duress and times of extreme, you know, prosperity are when actually talent really differentiates itself.
So let's talk about Adobe and your plans now, because the stock at a year high, which clearly at an all-time high, which clearly reflects the confidence that the market has in the Adobe story. What more can we expect in the year ahead?
Well, all three of our businesses are really doing extremely well. You know, reimagining the creative process. I mean, the publishing industry uses Adobe. Video is an explosive growth opportunity because the amount of video that's being consumed and monetized online is a massive opportunity. We're excited about electronic signatures. It's crazy in this day and age that people actually have to physically sign a document. But the largest opportunity we honestly still have is in what the world is calling digital disruption, because every industry, financial services, retail, airlines, hospitality, is being transformed by the business moving online, and Adobe is at the core of that infrastructure, and so that's the business that's actually growing the fastest. It's a software as a service business, and I think as companies in India have global aspirations, in addition to just Indian aspirations, that's where we hope to see our revenue grow quite dramatically. But we have to keep innovating, and that's what we're focused on.
So how do you get an organization which is, you know, sort of to retain a culture of innovation, to retain a culture of surprising the market?
Well, I think multiple ways. The first thing we do is we have this annual tech summit, and it's a geek fest where, you know, you bring all the engineers from all around the world, and they're like kids in a candy store because they're seeing all of the cool stuff that's happening. The second thing you have to honestly do is you have to celebrate failure as well. And, you know, I think the Valley is so special because encouraging people to experiment and not just recognizing those who succeed, but those who took a chance, even if it didn't succeed, I think sets a tone for, you know, you have to constantly reinvent yourself. And I think the company has always flourished by ensuring that we recognize that all businesses have a maturity curve. And so if you're not investing at the early stage all the time, you know, you're going to die and you're going to become a dinosaur. So I think, you know, we have to keep doing those. That's our recipe.
Okay, so what's your own personal management mantra, if I could call it that? You know, clearly anticipation is something that, especially given the fact that product cycles are just shrinking every single day, the ability to anticipate and also the ability to create new niches in the market. How do you go about that? What's your process?
Well, I think I say a couple of things, Shereen, honestly. The first is preserving the status quo is never a great business strategy. And I think there are a lot of companies who, once they're successful, feel like, okay, let me try and preserve the status quo as much as possible. The second thing I think we talk about a lot is if you can connect all the dots in terms of where you are and where you want to go as a company, you're probably not being aspirational enough. And so, you know, to use an imaging analogy, if we can expand the lens by which we look at an opportunity, you know, that's what I think is exciting about us. And, you know, in the Valley, you have to remain so guarded because there's somebody in a garage with a great idea and a ton of capital who's out gunning for the markets that you've created. And so, you know, I think that's part of what we have to keep doing.
So as a CEO, what keeps you awake at night?
Well, you know, I sleep like a baby, so, you know, I have actually...
So you've got all your bases covered, is it?
You know, what helps me to sleep is having a fantastic team, because hopefully they're staying awake all night worrying about things. But in all honesty, it's like, are we executing fast enough against the opportunity that we have? The other thing I will say is the global dynamics have changed more than ever before. And it used to be a few markets, the US, the UK, Germany, Japan for us, were where all of the action was. And now that's certainly not true. And so how we think about empowering people in other countries to take initiative, to take the leadership roles, that's something that I think we haven't yet cracked the code on, and so we have to keep working on how do you replicate the success you have in the US around the world.
So outside of India, which are the other emerging markets or the non-traditional markets that are looking exciting to you?
Well, some of the Eastern European markets are certainly, you know, growing quite dramatically for us. We have R&D now happening in places like Romania, for example. Switzerland, we bought a couple of companies. So Europe, we've actually acquired 4 to 5 companies in Europe. So a lot of innovation happening in Europe. Australia.
Is that because valuations are cheaper or, you know, closer access?
Well, I think, you have great technologists there, and maybe the technologists didn't have the brand to expand globally. And so if Adobe can come and find great people and great technology, we've been able to scale those businesses more than they could themselves because they don't have the brand. And I would say Latin America too, more as a market than as companies that we've bought. But, Friedman was right. The world is flat and innovation is everywhere.
So before I let you go, what would your advice be to entrepreneurs, startups, who are, looking beyond India, who have global aspirations today?
I would say follow your dream. I mean, follow your dream. It's clearly, something that exists. Opportunity has never been greater, and technology is the great disruptor.
Okay. You talked about failure and the importance of failure. Your biggest failure, and of course one that you were able to sort of ring fence the rest of the company from, but a chance that you took that didn't work out the way that you would like it to have.
Well, I was part of 2 startups, and they didn't necessarily achieve commercial success, one of which I co-founded. But the experience I gained from it was invaluable, and since we were doing work in imaging, it led me to Adobe. And so things have worked out, Shereen.
Well, Shantanu, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you very much for joining us, and here's wishing you all the very best.